Hey everybody, it's Dana Robinson going live from my office hours on Thursdays, 9 a.m. Pacific. Today I am broadcasting, as it were, on the road, networking in Chicago, Illinois. And today I'm going to talk about how to leverage your job. It's a subject that's become very important to me. It's the subject of my latest book, The King's Fly Swatter. The story that most people don't understand about entrepreneurship and about really moving up in your job and having the ability to move out of your job, whether that's become self-employed or whether that is to become management, to become an executive, to have control and agency in your career path is a sort of an activity of the mind to start with. So it's if you've got comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Software doesn't let me respond, but if I see things, then I'll add them to today's office hours. But let me start with this. Most people have jobs where they trust their employer to have their best interest at heart. And I don't want to slam on anyone's employer, but most employers just can't. Even the most well-intentioned, great culture environment has so many things going. They can't have every individual's career path in mind. And so what happens is most people don't end up getting the training that they need to move up in the jobs that they have. And if you're ambitious, then you can take responsibility for that. And so I like to think of it as taking the attitude that even while you work at a job, working for someone else, W-2, taking a paycheck, you work for you. And if you start by embracing the I work for me, even though I actually have a job with an employer and a W-2 paycheck where they tell me to show up and they give me work to do, when I take ownership of that job and treat it like I'm self-employed, even in that job, then it begins to change not only my mentality as an employee, but my approach to the job becomes different because I started thinking, well, what if this really was entirely my responsibility? What if I owned this role? And you start approaching the work context differently. I'm going to give you some tools today if you've got a job. It's important to note, I'm all about entrepreneurship and using your job as a tool to become an entrepreneur. But jobs are fine. And in fact, if you do the things that would enable you, empower you to become self-employed at your job, many times you'll just move up, or you'll have other opportunities at other jobs to go lateral and then move up from there. So what I'd like for you to do is start thinking about your job as a free, in fact, not only is it free training, but they pay you. So instead of showing up and saying, I give the minimum, I do what's required of me in this job, and then they pay me the minimum that's required for me to keep showing up. Instead of this truce, this standoff, start approaching the job like you want to get everything you can out of that job, even the things that no one is saying that are available to you. There's two things that I want to talk about today: skills, acquiring skills at a job, and building relationships while you're at your job. I'm going to start with skills. The skills that you get to do your job are just the minimum. They're there to have the employer run a business. They're trying to run a flywheel to get the economics that businesses get out of what they do. And you can do the job. In my book, The King's Fly Swatter, there's a servant of the court that just stands behind the king, swats flies. It's not a nice job. It's probably a horrible job. So even if your job is mundane and horrible, that job is what puts you in a context, a place where you have the opportunity to learn more. And I'll say this, that maybe you're at a job where there is no opportunity to learn more, and that's a job you should leave. And the job you take should be largely a job where you look around and say, I can learn something here. I can extract some skills. I can extract relationships. I can do something that's going to give me some lift. But most jobs have this. But you have to get good at the job that you have. So if you want to listen to the king, running the business, in the case of my parable, or you want to listen to the boss as she runs the business, you need to do the job that they hired you for really well. It needs to become intuitive. You need to become excellent at your job. But the moment you're there doing excellent, instead of asking for a pay raise or trying to figure out how you step up the standoff, start looking around and asking questions. Um, in terms of skills, look at your own competence and look around and say, well, could I do this other person's job? Start asking other people, what do you do? What are the skills that you had to do this job? How do you fit into the organization? Start asking a question about everything that happens. How does that get done? Who does that? And how does that get done? Um, I've been in management myself at companies, and in that role, people want to move up. And when we try to move them up, very often they don't have the skills to move up. And at small to medium companies, we might not have the resources to have trained them. So it's only the ambitious who have already begun to figure out, how do I get that skill so that I can step into that role, that are prepared. Very often, you might promote someone into a role and they just get there and flounder, and then they're frustrated, and you don't want that to be you. You don't want to get promoted and then have your employer say, well, how come you're not performing? And have you say, because you didn't teach me how to do this. Take responsibility for it before you step into that role. I'll give you a real life example. To step into certain management roles, you need to know how to run a P&L, right? You need to take responsibility for some piece or all of a budget. If you're in sales, for example, then you might be responsible for some piece of revenue generation or even of gross margin, which means that you might be responsible for some of the costs. If you're in other parts of management, you might have to manage overhead. And if me talking about costs, the revenue, the COGS or costs of acquiring the revenue, and then the overhead, which is how you run the business once you have delivered your goods or services. These are financial conversations, and there's lots of people in an organization that can't and shouldn't be in management until they understand that they have to take responsibility for a P&L, for example. So those are skills that you look around and say, how do I get that? If you want to be self-employed at some point, why wouldn't you want to get the skill of managing a P&L on someone else's dime, so that you can become self-employed and actually already know how to manage a profit and loss, how to manage the revenue and expenses of your business. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize about entrepreneurship, so moving up's a big deal, but moving out, having the agency, the freedom to move out, to become self-employed. Almost all of the entrepreneurs, the business owners that I've known in my career have been people that took a skill that they learned at a job and they leveraged that to become self-employed. And then very often they've done much different things later, but their step out of a job and into self-employment, where they have control over their time and begin to create some income that's going to give them some agency and some decision making about what they really want to do with their time. They have just said, I do this thing at work, I should just do this thing for me. So I was a lawyer at a law firm. I became a lawyer for myself. Nate, my podcast partner, worked at a company that had him doing marketing and SEO, and then he started an agency, built an agency, sold it, built another one, sold that. So the path is not, entrepreneurship's not typically a lightning strike of ideas that you get funded and you build a business around. Certainly that makes the headlines, and that's always an interesting story. But most people who succeed at business simply become very ambitious at work, learn everything they can, gain those skills, and then they make a decision. I could move up, I could be a partner at a law firm, or I could work for myself. So this is a super common story with service providers, but it could be anything. You're a project manager at a business, you can project manage on your own. For people, you can do fractional, you can run an agency, you can do the thing you do at work. But you need to get very good at all of the things that you don't know. And why not do it while you're at your job? So start asking questions and then start making a list of the things that you realize that you didn't know, and attributing some skills that you can look for. How do I learn this? And then start knocking those off. Like LinkedIn Learning is where a lot of you know me, taking one of my dozen or so courses on business negotiation, networking, entrepreneurship, IP law, the things that I've taught about. These are free. If you have a membership, and often your membership comes from a company that you work for. If you don't have a membership, a lot of local libraries with your library card give you access to LinkedIn Learning's platform, and you can gain skills there too. There are so many skills available on other platforms as well as LinkedIn Learning, and even a lot of people put their content on YouTube. The another place to go it comes from the conferences and the best practice groups and the trade shows. So the skills that you need also put you in this next category of things that you need to do while you have a job that are going to level you up and allow you to move up and work or out and work for yourself. And that's relationship capital. So the things you're going to look for: skills, relationship capital. Relationship capital is where you actually try to build true, meaningful relationships with people in your industry, outside your industry, and thinking about building this web of people who have greater skill than you, who have more knowledge than you. You can gain some formal or informal mentors, people who you can just go to and say, I'm thinking about this way. What am I getting right? What am I getting wrong? Some of those relationships can come out of your workplace, and you should certainly look for those. But a lot of them are going to come from around your industry, where you're going to be using the relationships that you can build because you have a job. But a lot of people just don't go to trade shows, best practice groups, industry events, the conferences around their industry. Maybe they feel they're not invited. Maybe the company won't pay for it. Maybe you have to use your own time and take paid time off or unpaid time off to go to something like that. Or they go and they just think, well, why am I here? How is this going to help me? And they're not really thinking out of the box. They're thinking, how do I get a promotion? So for a lot of people at jobs, they think, well, networking is, going to places where the management that's going to promote me sees me, where I get visibility. And that's just not a good approach to networking. What's going to give you the ability to move up at your job are your outside relationships. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is the more you network outside your job, the more recruited you'll be. Other companies and other recruiters, mentors will have and present opportunities to you. And it won't take long before the people at your job notice that and realize, oh, you have some control. You have, you're ambitious. You're taking the time to gain skills. We see that, and you're networking, and people, and things maybe that other people in your own company don't know, because you're getting visibility by networking, by being out there and trying to be exposed to things that aren't captive to your job. So instead of going to an industry event and sitting and just say learning in some sessions, that's important as well. But a lot of the sort of lobby con, as I like to call it, the foyer, the places where people at conferences are hanging out, are opportunities to just walk up and say to somebody, what do you do? And then just ask a lot of questions. So this curiosity is what a lot of people miss. They want to hand a business card and tell someone what they do, and you're not going to get very far doing that. Networking is about asking somebody what they do, paying attention, remembering it, taking notes afterwards, following up, and then building some relationships out of that, so that every time you go to something that might benefit your employer, might benefit you in your current role, you're building your Rolodex of relationships. And this is more valuable than money. So you're at a job, they pay you. While you're there, you're getting skills that you didn't have to go to school to get. So you're getting paid to go to school while you're at your job by extracting more skills than they've even asked you to get. And you're leveraging that job while you're being paid be there to amass the most important type of wealth that you can get, which is relationship capital. So that's going to be over the course of, a couple of years. Mentors, people who are in other areas of your business that will help you understand things about the business that you might not know, who can answer questions, who you can ask. I see this thing that companies do. Who does that? How did they do that? What were the skills that they needed to get there? Um, and then once you build that network, you can look for other centers of gravity around that network. So if I go to a big conference, in my industries have been landscape, HVAC and plumbing, audio books. These are spaces where I've invested heavily. And so going to those trade shows and industry events really important. But then what you find is once you make some relationships, then you'll find out about smaller groups, a little bit more intimate. Um, People might ask you to present what you know at something. You can be generous with mentoring other people, sharing what you know, and it puts you into circumstances where then you're around people that are telling you what they know. So that you're teaching and learning. You're being curious and generous in this perpetual cycle. And some people because I have 3 or 4 networking courses on LinkedIn Learning, which I'll unlock after this for anyone who wants to watch those. They get stuck on, I can't find a group. There is a group for every industry. I have not yet found an industry, the businesses I've looked at investing in the indoor garage, industrial parking structures. There's an entire association around parking. There's a trade show every fall. There's a trade show for everyone in the death care industry. There's multiple trade shows in HVAC plumbing. I know that the landscape maintenance businesses and landscape, multiple conferences around the country, and then smaller best practice groups that gather regionally or gather based on the type of business, the size of the business, are places where more networking can happen, where more learning can happen, and more relationship building can happen. And along the way, you want to become the center of your own gravity. You might actually form a little mastermind, a little network that's informal yourself. You get 10 people who you've met that have some synergies, and just start having a practice call just once a month, an hour. What are we up to? Or I've been to some of these that people host where they have a meal and the center of gravity says, we're all getting together, you're all welcome. And in some cases, if they've got a business and it's important for them to network, they're paying for other people to come and have drinks or have a meal. But these don't have to cost anything either. So you can network where you find opportunities from work, but then you can literally create your own networking groups as well. So just the last 2 minutes here, I'm just going to reiterate, you got a job. You feel like you can't control your destiny because you're waiting for your employer to do something for you. Stop. Take control even while you have a job. Do excellent at your job. Master your job. But the moment you do, start looking for what else can I do while I'm here at this job where they pay me to amass skills. And literally make a list of those skills so that you're achieving those. You can set goals and say, this year I'm gonna get a new skill a month, and here are the skills that are going to be useful for me, that are going to help me, whether I move up in this company, whether I move out and up to another company, which is lateral movement is always a great way up, and you're always preparing yourself for the opportunity to become self-employed if you desire that, and you're avoiding this sort of myth that entrepreneurship is a spark of genius. It's really someone who's amassed some skills, that has learned the business of the business, and they step out of their job and into entrepreneurship or business ownership, doing something that they did at a job, and often a job that sucked, a job that they didn't like. So no matter how much you don't like the job you have, before you leave it, look around and ask, have I extracted all the skills? and all the relationships that I can out of this. Um, so start thinking like a small business owner while you have a job. That's the heart of this, is that wherever you are, start thinking like a business person, and get really curious, and then start answering your own questions. You're going to ask questions, you're going to get answers, you're going to make lists, you're going to acquire the skills that people say that you need. And those skills are yours. This is the beautiful thing about skills and relationships, is that they are largely portable. Your relationships are an organic extension of you. You don't get to walk with your customer list, for example. If you work for a company, it's theirs. But these are your friends at some point. These are your relationships, and these can last a lifetime and feed your entire career in a business or as a self-employed person. So start approaching your work differently every day, and don't look for the rewards, don't look for the accolades, don't look for the pay raise. The reward is the skill, and the reward is the relationship. Those skills and relationships are yours, and they're your, kind of secret trophies that are going to empower you to be able to move up and move out and become eventually, if you want, an entrepreneur, a self-employed person, which is what I love. So as always, you're welcome to interact with me on LinkedIn. hello@danarobinson.com is the best way to reach out to me. It gets my emails into a queue so that I don't have them get abandoned into a big inbox. hello@danarobinson.com. And thank you for everyone coming on my weekly office hours, 9 a.m. on Thursdays.